Hello and welcome to the Is AI the Future of AU podcast series. I'm Peter Vakis and I'm the technology lead for Accenture in Australia and New Zealand. In this three-part series, we discuss the state of AI adoption in Australia, the challenges and opportunities for AI adoption, and how AI can be embedded into an organisation. Thanks for joining me today to discuss the state of adoption of artificial intelligence in Australia. With me, I have my friend and colleague, Brad Ryan, who is a Managing Director at Accenture Australia and leads our robotics capability. Brad, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Pete. It's great to be here.
Now, before I invite Brad to the conversation, let me spend just a few minutes to set the context for today's discussion. So, according to some Accenture research, Australia can seize $400 billion of value from AI, which is a huge amount and it's staggering. So what potential value do you think organisations in Australia can gain by adopting AI?
GDP growth typically comes from two factors, labour and capital efficiency. What we've seen over the last few years is that these two factors are not driving the economic growth that we expect or we need in our market. And what we've come to realise is that we need another driver of that economic growth. And AI provides that new factor of productivity.
How does it do that?
There are really three key ways that it drives that growth. Firstly, through what we call intelligent automation. So that's, enabling automated workers, if you like bots, to process transactions which are typically done manually and are labour intensive. Now, I guess what differentiates this from normal automation is that these are more complex tasks, more adaptable tasks, and the AI solution needs to be able to react and adapt to that in a flexible manner.
So that's really important, because when most people think about automation, they think about manual, repetitive, boring tasks. But when you bring AI into the mix, we're talking about more complex tasks.
We're talking about things where you're interacting with customers, right, who are asking all sorts of questions you don't expect. So potentially you could be a call centre. There's a product on the market called Amelia by IPsoft. And that product is a virtual assistant, and it can take multiple calls from multiple customers in different languages at the same time. And it will work through a standard set of responses to questions that the customers ask. But if it doesn't know a question, it'll route that question to a human operator and then listen and learn from that and update its system going forward so that it continually evolves and gets better.
So how does it learn? What's the learning mechanism?
Without going into the detail, it has a machine learning capability. So effectively, it records the interaction, it updates the knowledge repository that it has so that when that question's asked again, it can react. Another example of how you get benefit out of AI is through augmentation. So I guess working with humans to make them more effective and more efficient in doing their jobs. A lot of the tasks we do are labour intensive. There are lots of data, lots of processing that needs to be done, and humans take a long time to do that. What we can do with AI is we can process that information very quickly. We can then analyse it and sort through the possible outcomes and make recommendations to users so that they can make more informed decisions about how to do their jobs. They can also be provided with support. So, for example, if you're maintaining some equipment or something like that, we can use AI to tell you how best to service it, when best to service it, and that improves our capital efficiency.
So Brad, importantly here, one thing that you're saying, that I think you're saying, if I could summarise, is that we're not talking about AI replacing jobs, right? You're really talking about it being a cognitive augmentation to what people do, I suppose, right? You know, there's a lot of research out there, and I think this is Australian research, that says half of the general public think that AI is going to make their lives worse in the future. In fact, they think AI will take away their jobs. So it's important to type of dispel that myth, I suppose, isn't it?
Well, look, and I'm not sure it's a myth, but it's certainly, there are certain jobs which are going to be more impacted by AI in terms of reducing the amount of jobs in that area. Equally, it will create new jobs and in new areas. And I think what we see with AI, which I think is something that's often overlooked, is AI will do a lot of the work to make things simpler going forward. So people who are traditionally doing very simple jobs today will be able to do what is today a more complex job because it will be easier to do in the future. We'll have more information provided you by AI solutions, making it more easy for people to reskill and retrain themselves. And I guess the third factor of value that companies can expect through AI is through diffusion in the market. And we often forget this, right? So AI itself adds value, but AI and the innovations that it creates, so things like autonomous cars, these sorts of things generate a whole ecosystem around them. So there's innovation that comes from the innovation. So for example, in that scenario, you might have all sorts of products and services offered to connected cars that might generate a whole new industry. Things around the charging stations of those cars. Maybe there's a solar industry that recharges the electric cars. All of those things that spawn off the initial AI solution will drive economic growth in our country, and that's good for Australia.
Yeah, it is, and that's really some great and interesting technologies here. But here comes the problem, right? Australia lags in being able to take some of those technologies and scale them up to be able to adopt AI at the level that we'd like to see in this country. So why do you think that is? What's the reason for that?
Yeah, look, there's a number of different reasons for that. I think firstly, skills. Australia is definitely lacking the volume of skills in AI that we need to kind of grow this into the full extent of its capability. And we can work on how we can grow those through schooling and retraining people, but also access to global talent if we need to augment that. So I think firstly, skills is really a shortcoming. Secondly, we don't have the ecosystem in Australia. So when we look at countries like India or even the US at Silicon Valley, they have very tight ecosystems around innovation, and geographically they've co-located a lot of their innovative organisations so they can build upon each other. In Australia, we're very spread, and we don't have those hubs of innovation that are driving that economic growth. And I guess secondly, when you look at the way the ecosystem works together, so businesses collaborating with universities or R&D facilities, in Australia that number is very, very small. It's like 3% of companies
I heard
collaborating.
That was staggering. When I read that, I couldn't believe that was the case.
That's right. So we need a much better collaboration in those facilities to kind of take up that new technology solutions. I think, look, as you mentioned before, ethical and social concerns are clearly still a problem for adopting AI wholesale. So we need to actively talk about the social implications of AI, what it means, what we'll need to do to proactively help people retain their employment, reskill themselves, how we generate new job opportunities. All of those things need to be effectively managed. And I think it comes down to the governments, it comes down to businesses, talking to their employees, talking to their constituents, and explaining to them what the master plan is. When people understand the plan and understand how it's going to work, they're much more accepting of these things. And look, it's new and we're all still sort of learning, and there are policies to be developed, so there's a long way to go.
So in your opinion, what role does government policy play in facilitating AI adoption in this country?
Yeah, look, I think firstly they need to remove all the roadblocks for innovation. For us, it's about planning ahead, making sure there are policies, things like drone delivery, things like the share economy. Having rules and legislation in place that will support those businesses growing is really important. That certainly can stifle an economy pretty quickly. I think it's making it easier to access skills in the global market. As we continue to grow locally here, it will take time for us to develop the skills we need to grow. If we're going to avail ourselves of the opportunity quickly, we are going to need to access skills in the global market to support us. I think having incentives for businesses to collaborate with the universities is probably a good idea for us to try and drive that, and government funding and R&D. So when you talk about investment, whilst businesses in Australia are investing around about $8 million per annum, which is actually quite a good number for an individual business to be investing in AI globally. When you look at government investment, I think sadly lacking behind countries like Singapore and the UK and the US, and that's where we really need to kind of drive that uptake of I guess additional investment. Venture capital funding is also very low.
So it sounds to me like government really isn't doing enough when it comes to policy changes, investment in innovation in this country.
That's right. And I think also supporting us to retrain and reskill our people. I think going forward, the cost of education in this country is going to be prohibitive for a lot of people to retrain themselves, and we need to think long and hard about how we make it more available to people going forward.
Okay, that's interesting. So within organisations, who is responsible for ensuring that AI technologies are implemented?
Yeah, look, I think AI technology is something that needs to be part of the CEO agenda, right? It needs to be a C-suite initiative. It impacts all parts of the business. So if you think about it from a technology point of view, obviously the CIO needs to be there. They need to understand the technology. But really that's the thin end of the solution, right? We need to think about it from a HR point of view. You're creating a whole new digital workforce here, and we need to understand both how we're going to manage those digital workers, how we're going to assess their performance. We're going to need to work out the implications implications on our human workforce and how we get them to work together effectively. So HR has a very big role to play. But if you think about the new products and services that we're going to be offering in the market, you've got sales, customer service, R&D, supply chain, they're all impacted by this, right? And that's where I think if you think that AI is a technology solution, you're missing the point, right? It really is a business impact, and that's what we need to drive.
So it sounds to me like that type of intelligent software needs to be deployed across the entire value chain. So absolutely everybody in any organisation, in any government, is responsible for understanding these technologies and how they would use them to improve their business, improve their productivity.
That's right.
Find new services, new products, etc.
Absolutely, and it's to be embedded in everything we do. Andrew Ng from Baidu referred to it as AI as the new electricity, and I think that's kind of the way we need to think about it. It's fundamentally a part of everything we do, making the things that we do more effective and more efficient, and I guess creating all new opportunities for us going forward.
Brad, I think we're going to have to wrap it up here. Thanks very much for your time.
Well, thank you, Peter. It's been great being a part of it.
Some really interesting food for thought on the adoption of AI in Australia. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Please join me for the next episode where we will explore the challenges and opportunities for AI adoption. For more information, you can visit accenture.com.au/AI. See you next time.